Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Duty on a Real Estate, episode 11. And this time, it's going to be an incredible one. We have Mr. Christian Catron. This man is a family man. He's a man of God, but most importantly, he loves real estate. And he's going to bestow some incredible knowledge. So let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Christian Catron.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here. You have no idea. I drove all the way up from Austin to come be with you. And so I'm excited. Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. I'm excited about the reach that it'll have for the military community and others who are interested in what you have to say, man. So I'm excited.
Thank you so much because you came here with your family. You put your sons in an Air Force Academy camp. Yeah. So all you Air Force guys, he supports, even though he's West Point. But
I don't hate.
That's right. We're all one army. And so, but let's talk about that military career, right? And how did you end up in real estate?
Oh, man, before I even go into that, it's probably important to go all the way back, right? So I was born in a third world country on a dirt floor. And didn't move to the United States until I turned 7, right before I turned 7. And I learned to speak English watching Fat Albert and Garfield and Friends. And really, it was through that experience and having lived in poverty and coming to the U.S. and learning about this thing called the American Dream. And of course, I felt an obligation to serve this great country in some capacity because of the opportunities that had been provided to me, being able to come out of that. And so had the opportunity to go to West Point, was served in the military, and all the research I had done about, how you achieve this American dream pointed me to real estate, right? And so that's really how ultimately over the course of my lifetime, I ended up where I am now, is wanting to first serve in the military and give back to this country, but then also realizing that, man, if I'm going to have influence and impact, not only in the community that I'm in now, but then also to be able to help and support, the environment that I came from, where I was born, I really needed to aspire to being able to create wealth and live out this American dream. And so that's ultimately what led me to real estate.
Wow. You want to talk about the immigrant edge?
Oh, yes, sir.
I mean, that's incredible. It's so cool to hear that because not even from the U.S., you come in here, you learn a completely different language. I mean, I know my wife is from Latvia, and so she had the same path where she had to learn the language, the culture, understand what works, what doesn't, and as you grow up, you eventually heard the American dream, and you're like, I want this.
Right.
And it's so funny because the common denominator is real estate.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear that. Now, you already start with a diverse life.
Right.
And so talk about your diverse background a little bit more, because I imagine that helped you lead to that, hey, I can do real estate, or I can, leave the military and do something so entrepreneurial.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, like I said, I was born in the Philippines. I was the product of an American sailor, so I don't hate on the Navy either, right? American sailor and a local gal who got together, and there I was. Really, I mentioned that because my journey to go from that to where I am now and getting into real estate and the diverse background. So I'm half Black and Filipino. I know what it's like to sort of vibe with both cultures as well as cultures outside of my immediate one, and really understanding just how important diversity is within, the real estate game, but then also just in life in general. And really, we learned a lot of that in the military in our experience. I think the roommates that I had at West Point, one was from Bulgaria, one was from Turkey, one was from Oklahoma, which arguably is another country. It could be. I love my peeps from Oklahoma. But no, I mean, it prepares you to have exposure to and the ability to interact with just about anybody, right? And so not just people who look and speak like you do. And so that's one of the major factors of being able to really move into real estate. What I found is, you have to be able to engage with people at the highest levels. I mean, just yesterday I'm talking with some institutional fund managers who are considering allocating a lot of capital to our fund, and also at the same time talk with, vendors on the ground who may speak a different language, and you have to be able to communicate with those folks too, and everything in between. So yeah, I love talking about diversity and how it interplays with real estate.
It's so refreshing to hear that you're taking your diversity that you have personally and using it to your leverage. If you think about it, right? Because it's real estate's a relationship. It's a people. Yeah. It's a people business, right? And it's great to hear that how you took what you learned and you're like, hey, I can apply this to what I want to do in real estate. And you gave the audience a little Costco free sample about a fund, but before there was a fund, I think there was a company called Redeem Investments.
Yeah, baby.
So given your background, the diversity that you experienced, the military, what made you go right into creating your own company in real estate?
Yeah, so I think, it was definitely a journey in order to get there. What I haven't mentioned is the gap between, my military career and how that ended to how I even got into real estate. And so I'll share that a little bit now in attempt to answer that question. So at West Point, I got injured a lot between football and other sports. I won't go into all the different injuries that I've had and surgeries, but suffice it to say, it was that experience and being well cared for in the hospitals up at Keller and even in the military community that prompted me to want to be able to give back somehow when I got out of the military. And so I didn't realize that people could get paid selling drugs from the back of their car legally. And so I actually found a job doing pharmaceutical sales. And at the time, a lot of junior military officers were being recruited for sales in pharmaceuticals. And that's actually how I started my career. 20 years later, past my MBA, past operations experience and project management and business development, all these things, I realized that I've been given a great opportunity to accumulate a great bit of experience and skill set that would then set me up to be able to launch my own company, albeit not in healthcare, but the skill sets to be able to transition into doing real estate. And so I started doing real estate, my wife and I, in 2017, started with residential fix and flips and wholesaling and private money lending and that type of thing, and then transitioned very quickly to doing commercial real estate and bought 3 apartment buildings in 2019. We've since disposed of our multifamily assets and have now expanded into other asset classes within commercial real estate that I'm happy to talk about sort of how and why. But yeah, that's sort of the development and the evolution of Redeem Investments. So my wife and I launched it, founded it in October of 2017. Since that time, we've grown in terms of our team size. I've had a fellow West Point grad join me as a business partner and chief operating officer, Michael Uperio, who you well know, and then other team members as well as we've grown and expanded. So, yeah, it's been an exciting journey.
Man, I love hearing stories of creation like that, especially the business that you created, the family that you created within that investment. And really, the purpose behind Redeem Investments. But I want people to understand that you mentioned give back, right? And a lot of veterans tuning in, they need to understand they have a set of skills, a set of experiences that one day they will reflect on and say, I could give back to the world. Yeah. And it's so good to hear this, because this podcast is an opportunity to give back to the veteran community, to hear people's story like yours and to inspire others. And so it's great that you thought about that. You're like, man, I had an experience in the military. I want to give back. Obviously, that first love, if you will, was the medical industry, but it eventually led you to, I think, the American dream, which is real estate. Yeah. And so you went to serve again, if you think about it. Now that you have Redeem Investments, let's talk a little bit about it, because you mentioned about those funds, right? Mm-hmm. And it looks like you have a couple of funds. You got a fund, an Armor Fund, an REF1, renewable energy, converting office buildings. Let's talk about that lineage of initiatives there.
Yeah. Well, so going back to what you said previously, there's a quote in my favorite book that says, to whom much is given, much is required, right? And so I think that's part of the inspiration for me is, man, I really don't want at the end of my life to look back and think that I had more to give, and I didn't fulfill my greatest potential. And so part of the way I'm aiming to do that is really by giving back and utilizing what God's given me to steward and be able to do that. With regards to the funds, yeah, so I think what's really cool about the fund structure, and for those who may not know what that is, effectively, if you've ever been part of a syndication or an investment type where multiple investors pooled capital together to invest in a particular deal, that's called a single asset syndication. An investment fund is similar to that in that you're still raising capital and pooling monies together, but you're putting it into a portfolio or a vehicle that's acquiring multiple properties as opposed to just one. With regards to the first fund that we launched called Renewable Energy Fund 1, so nothing creative about the name, Redeem Ref 1, that one was really designed in an effort to get into the fund world and partnering with a specific renewable energy developer, a minority developer, one of the largest MBE certified developers in the country, who had a pipeline of projects on the East Coast in order to create these utility scale solar farms. And so they needed financing for pre-development and development costs. In other words, legal, permitting, site selection, all these different things before you get to the point of NTP, which is notice to proceed, at which point all the banks and all the lenders come out of the woodwork because now your project is viable and it's bankable, right? Prior to that, there's a good bit of work that needs to happen that still needs financing, and that's where we created this fund and be able to help them. Some things happened along the way where their projects got delayed, of course, due to regulatory changes and things like that, which then opened the door for us to look at other developers to partner with. And incidentally, there was one whose CEO is a West Point grad. And so we have since funded one of their projects and are looking to fund more. But the way the fund works is we have investors who come in. And I think for that particular fund, the minimum is 60. So investors come in, and then we take their capital and then we deploy it in the form of loans, short-term loans to these developers. Those developers pay us interest, and then we pay our investors a 12% annualized return, paid on a monthly basis. So it's mailbox money, right? So they're just getting that money sent to them. And our largest investor, our anchor investor, dropped almost $800,000 into that deal and has been enjoying the benefits of being able to get that type of mailbox money. So that's the first fund, right? The second fund, really interestingly, came about as we were watching some of the demographic trends that are monumental in the country right now. The first of which most people know about is called the silver tsunami, right? So as of today, 1 out of every 5 Americans is over the age of 65. And that number continues to increase as the population continues to age. As the population continues to age, people live longer, people get sicker, okay? And so while, yes, I agree, and it's a fact that the affordable housing crisis is a thing. There's a shortage in senior housing as well. There's also a shortage in medical real estate, okay, in order to be able to care for the aging population, right? And so what we said, that's the first trend that we saw is the silver tsunami. The second one that we saw is something called the hybrid workforce revolution, okay? So I don't think it takes, unless you've been under a rock, and you're not watching the headlines, gone are the days that companies are leasing 10, 20, 30,000 square feet of office space. What is now happening is a company might need 4 executive suites and then 1 conference room 1 day a week, right? Well, that type of structure creates an opportunity to be able to use office space to be converted to that type of a structure. So in other words, sort of a hybrid co-working type of a space. That's one type of exit strategy that we have for acquiring these office buildings. However, if you go back to what I was saying earlier, when you pair these two demographic trends together, the question comes about, well, why don't we use office buildings that are vacant or underutilized and then convert them into medical office buildings to provide more capacity for the aging population? And so that's really the what laid the foundation for what we're calling the Redemption Armor Fund. Redemption, because our name is Redeem Investments, there's obviously some spiritual underpinnings there. One of our investors told us, okay, you just explained that you guys buy properties and you fix it up and you called it a renovation project, but it sounds to me like that's a redemption project. And I said, okay, well, yeah, we called our properties Redemption Square, Sweet Redemption, Redemption Tower, and now the fund is called Redemption Armor Fund. Now, ARMOR stands for Adaptive Reuse and Medical Office Realty. Right. And so it's not just because my business partner was an armor officer. It's not just because the types of assets that we're buying by definition are defensive in nature. So there's your armor. We feel that parking capital in commercial real estate, especially ones that are recession resilient, that have high demand like medical office, that is a defensive strategy, which is what you want in this environment right now, is capital preservation. That's first and foremost. And then you start looking at other benefits, the return profile, tax benefits, and so on. So I love what we're doing, but that's really the nature of all of that, how all of that comes together.
Man, I hope you guys are taking notes because, one, you are demonstrating what I love is due diligence. You are extremely diligent just in this podcast and explaining the genesis of Redeem Investments and where you are. So that's kudos to you. And it's a reminder to veterans that, they prepare the battlefield, right? They start understanding preparation. It was intelligence preparation of the battlefield, right? And so you noticing like, hey, the demographics, there is a threat. There is a challenge, and being resourceful and stuff. That's like, dude, you're right on in your inherent abilities that you've gathered in the military and your leadership. What I do love is how the Redemption Armor Fund was literally curated through intentionality, because you're over there seeking and supporting this mission, and then boom, it naturally comes about. And I think that's the best way for things to be born. Yeah. Is throughout an intention and purpose, not like artificial through like ChatGPT or something, But no, that's awesome because there's a mission behind that. And, just to speak, on the spirituality of it, I mean, there's no, like everyone believes in something in a foxhole, right? There's
right.
no,
that's right.
What was the quote? I forgot. I left my head, but there's no atheist in a foxhole, right? So it's good to hear that there is, in God we trust type purpose in that, that dollar bill hole. And so talk about how your faith is central to the Redeem Investments, because I imagine through your faith and through your experiences, in project management and the medical field, you probably won some adversities. You overcame some adversities, right? Anything you can talk about, because what you just mentioned, I imagine you've dealt with some serious challenges at the closing table.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, we're going through some challenges now with regards to the acquisition of office buildings, right? And rightly so, because if anyone is aiming to acquire an office building for the purpose of running it as a traditional office, thinking that, they're going to lease it to a company that, will take up 10, 20, 30,000 square feet. Like I said, that's just not happening right now. Or if it does, it's taking, 2 years or longer. And, there's a lot of holding costs that you would have to incur during that time. So there's certainly a lot of challenges with regards to that. It's really partnering with the right lenders who understand the vision and can see clearly, okay, we understand from your risk mitigation purposes, you guys aren't closing on any properties or intending to acquire any that there's not a pre-negotiated lease or there's not a franchise agreement with a hotel, because that's our first acquisition in this, by the way, is a 10-story office building that we're turning into a Courtyard Marriott hotel. So we have a franchise agreement or some type of a partnership agreement with IWG Regis or some other type of co-working company that this is their specialty, this is what they do, and they're rock stars at it. And having those kinds of partnerships in place and executed agreements, that to me is what gives us a bit more comfort in terms of having some risk mitigation. going back to the question about, my faith, I mean, it's really a privilege to be able to serve in any capacity. Again, understanding what my background upbringing is, I don't think anybody sort of is in the position that they are sort of by happenstance, right? I think there's some ordained, orchestrated step that allows you to get to where you are. And so the question is, what do you do when you're there, right? I recently heard, and I can't recall exactly where I heard this, but I think it might have been a sermon at church recently where it was talking about these miracles that were performed. And one of the miracles, if you've heard the story, is about the paralytic man, right? And in it, Jesus says to him, pick up your mat and walk. But this guy hasn't walked in 45 years since he was born. He's born this way, right? And yet he still needed to take some action, even though the miracle had been performed, right? Only when you take action can you realize that miracle. And so I say all of that to say that I feel like the road has been paved, and I have no question and no doubt about where I'm supposed to be 5-10 years from now, but also takes the necessary steps between now and then for me to take, one foot in front of the other and continue to build team and expand and grow and pursue various opportunities. So, I kind of feel like I said, I mean, faith has been an instrumental part of my journey, and I want to make sure that I'm doing all I can to be able to be told, well done, good and faithful servant.
Amen. I love, it reminds me of manifest destiny, right? And in order to really achieve your destiny, the path that's been paved, you need to take that first foot forward.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people probably don't have the courage or the confidence to take action. And it's just so good to hear this story, because I want those veterans thinking about, man, I know there's something greater out there for me. Yeah. I just need my battle buddy. And I'm hoping this is a battle buddy scenario, right?
Yeah.
And so thanks so much for sharing. Now, you're on this yellow brick road, right, to your manifest destiny and redeem. Is there like a case study where you look back and you're just like, man, what an experience? It's something that you quickly want to say to someone. You only got 5 minutes to motivate someone. You tell them a war story, right? Anything that comes to mind, or maybe something a defeat, where you're like, man, this ain't gonna happen to me next time.
Yeah.
Right. Lessons learned. AAR.
That's such a good question. So there's a framework that I think about called the 4 C's, right? And you actually named a 5th C that I might add. I might co-author that with you. Yeah. So it's character, competence, creativity, and courage. You mentioned confidence. That's the 5th one that I might add here. And in the context of this question, I want to speak on the first one. I can address the others if you like later. But character. So our very first apartment that when you look at our track record, the first one on there is an apartment that suffered heavy losses due to COVID, right? It was a Class C asset in a neighborhood that was not in a bad neighborhood at all, but apparently criminals and bullets don't know where the dividing line is, okay? And so especially during a time like COVID, when local communities are really stressed and things are depressed, crime tends to spill over from outside the communities where they're supposed to be contained. And so this apartment was sort of victim to that. That was one aspect of it. You would also think that, when something called rent relief comes about, that people would get these checks and they would run to their landlord and actually pay their rent. How naive of me to think that that's what people would do. And that's certainly not what happened. And so ultimately, long story short, that property got taken back by the bank. And it was one of the most depressing times of my life, really thinking about all the emotional roller coaster that was, because we came to a point where we got very close to actually selling it and being able to offload the property, but the lender decided not to allow us to do that. What's interesting about this entire experience is thinking about integrity, thinking about character, like I just said, because of the high level of communication and engagement that we had with our investors in that. And the fact that I pledged to be able to make them whole on that investment, no matter how long it took, many of those investors are our most loyal investors to this day. Some of them have invested multiple times over. We've won on other deals where they've gotten an incredible return in a short amount of time. And we've already started to make them whole on that lost investment. And so they remain loyal to this day. And so that's been really exciting. What that means is I know what pain these current multifamily operators and even office operators are going through when they've got adjustable rate mortgages that are shooting through the roof, or loans that are preparing to mature, and yet the value is not there to be able to refinance or sell the property. I've had a couple of properties come across my way that the seller only wanted what the loan balance was, meaning they've already realized that this is not worth me trying to sell it at what I purchased it for and try to recoup any amount of equity. So all of that to say, part of the driver for us pivoting to doing what we're doing now is realization of how things were going within that space where we started in multifamily. You ask any multifamily operator right now, a lot of them will tell you that they're experiencing significant challenges, right? And the ones that are going to be able to ride it out the most are ones who are, it's not even a matter of intelligence. I was going to say smart enough. It's not a matter of intelligence. The ones who thought in advance to lock in fixed rates and have long-term debt, those are the ones that are going to be able to ride it out okay, especially in markets where rental rates are either stabilized or are still continuing to grow. But if you're in a market where you've had significant negative year-over-year rent growth, if you've got rising adjustable rate mortgages, the amount of income that property is generating is going to be inadequate to be able to service that debt, and therefore you're bleeding cash. And if you don't have adequate cash reserves, then you're in trouble. And so now as we underwrite deals, so to answer your question of how that informs what we do now, we have such a meticulous underwriting process, reserves for operating reserves, interest reserves. We have contingencies for the contingencies. We have guaranteed max price with our contractors. We've got rate caps from Goldman Sachs that we're buying. Like we're highly mitigating risk in a lot of these situations. And then, as it relates to, as I mentioned earlier, we're not closing on anything where we don't have an executed agreement. On the way up here, my son and I, who I'm getting exposure into real estate, we drove and did a tour of a property that we should be going under contract on next week out in Abilene. It's a medical office building. And in that scenario, we negotiated pretty heavily to land at a price where even if the third unit is not leased ever, we meet our investor return hurdles just with the income from the 2 units, right? If we end up leasing that third unit, the numbers don't even look realistic anymore. And so anyway, that's just sort of to describe how that instance and that situation that occurred has helped us for the better over the long run, despite the pain in the short run.
Money. It's funny. You played football at West Point. You were obviously injured, so you dealt with a lot of adversity, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I always remember growing up is adversity reveals character. And you had adversity right there. You're like, man, tenants aren't paying. COVID, the world's ending. You could have easily filed bankruptcy. You could have literally scapegoat, done something, right? Sorry, investors.
Right.
And I love how you led with that because our battle buddy Samir Patel, right? He's a big private lender. Hope he comes on the show one day. But he talks about really you're a custodian of managing risk. Anyone like nice brokers can tell you the reward all day, but the best ones are going to help lead you in times of adversity, help mitigate risk, be preemptive. And I love how you just put those layered risk approach. So that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. But I want to hone in back on those 4 or maybe 5 principles. So we talked about character.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give a huge story about each one, but I love it because it's a North Star for anyone, any veteran transitioning to real estate. Hey, man, you got to have character. You got to be competent. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to be consistent, right? You want to be creative, especially in this market where you're looking at demographics and you're like, silver tsunami here, these offices vacant, let's put them together, right? That's incredible. Courage to to sign the loan document, right? Like, that's a lot of courageousness right there. And then maybe confidence, right? Because that definitely all gives you confidence.
Yeah.
So give like a quick line item of like competence.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers talks about 10,000 hours, right? And we really need to put enough at bats, put enough hours in order to obtain mastery at anything. I've only been at this since 2017, commercial since 2019. I don't feel like I myself am sort of a Jedi master. But what I have done is I've partnered with hotel operators with 25, 30 years of experience, right? I've called on the mentorship of the Jim Youngs of the world, fellow West Point grad real estate developer out of Austin, whoop, whoop. And others in order to bring that experience and that expertise that I lack. My partner Michael, I mean, all of these people, all of these resources in order to help bolster and increase that level of competency, so that I myself am not the only one having to have all of that within one body. It's a team approach. So that's what I would say with regards to competency. With regards to courage, like you said, I mean, it's what I think I can't remember who said it, but I think I heard this story about someone who dropped their keys in an alley. Okay. And someone else sees them and they're searching for their keys, but they're searching underneath the spotlight. And then they asked him, so, hey, what are you doing? And they said, I'm searching for my keys. And he said, well, where did you drop it? And he said, in the alley. He said, why are you searching over here? He's like, because there's more light over here. Right? So whatever takeaway you want to take from that, the point being, you've got to have the courage to go look for it where it is, even if it's dark. Right? And so there's a story about courage. So everything that we're doing with regards to the Armor Fund absolutely takes courage, because yes, it is an office building, but there's so much opportunity to convert it into something that's a higher and better use for the benefit of that local community. And if it's not a medical office building, then perhaps it's something else. The way that we know that the demand is there is when we partner with, and this is, I don't mind sharing sort of part of our edge, is partnering with the local municipality. Because guess what? Just like last Thursday evening, when the local city approved our $4 million cash grant and property tax abatement, that to me shows that there's a strong interest in partnering to bring online a much needed hotel in their core business district. Right? And so it takes courage to have those types of conversations. It takes courage to pursue this type of investment thesis. And so, we are admittedly running into a burning building while others are running away, but it's because we see the opportunity and we see it in a different light. Right? And then finally, thinking creatively about these things. That's the whole adaptive reuse play. The very building where you've established this foothold in Colorado Springs downtown, if you tell the folks where exactly we are, it's amazing to see, just how incredible this place is, but it's not what it was intended to be. And yet here you are creating such impact by having folks like myself join you here in this very room in the heart of this building that's incredible in the downtown area here. So all of that together is really what I'm talking about. But you from that fifth C, that confidence, it took the confidence to kind of do this, right? Courage and confidence, I think, work together.
Man, I mean, this is a good training session for our audience, for people listening. It's almost going to give them a roadmap to do what they want to do. Right? I love how you broke it down. Competence is reps, right? Because competence will lead to confidence. And I love how you talk about like the humility that you have to have in order to gain competence, right? You're like, dude, I've been doing this for years and I still don't feel confident, right?
Yeah, it's very true.
But and you keep going back and doing your reps. You keep going back and probing the market, finding opportunity. And that's what people need to understand when they're going to go on this real estate journey after they're veteran, after their veteran history. It's like, dude, you ain't going to be perfect, but you got to be showing up every day.
No doubt.
And, I love that. Another thing I love is how you add, like, you're not going to get to point B right away, but you know you can bring someone on your team who's already at point B. And I love how you literally showcase that, right? Through Michael, my XO, James Tabor. I mean, without him, I don't think I would be where I'm at, right? And so remember, you don't have to go alone in this journey. It's not 40 days in the desert, right, where you get tempted, right? And so love everything. Love the courage part. A lot of people don't understand that people who are acting courageous are acting scared, but with prudent risk. Yeah. That's all they're doing. They're fear. You scared. We all sweat at night, right? But you know you got the mitigating controls in place, and you did your due diligence, right? And so that's what people need to understand. That courage is just people who are scared acting in prudent risk. Like that's all it is.
Yeah, that's good.
No, I love it. I love it. This is great. So remember, guys, the 4 or 5 C's, right? So you got character, competence, creativity, courage, which all gives you the confidence. So love it, and thank you for sharing that. Now, since we've been highlighting veterans and highlighting your story, what are you going to tell that NCO, that soldier, that airman, that sailor who is finishing their military career? They've been thinking about real estate because, as we all know, real estate is part of our military career with the VA loan, housing. It's the American dream. It's one of the benefits you get with the VA loan when you get out. What are you going to tell, Sergeant Catron, Lieutenant Catron? Hey, when you get out, these are things you should do. These are non-negotiables, maybe.
I did some reflection here recently on my military career, and specifically the job I had as a field artilleryman.
Boom, boom.
Right? Boom, boom. And for anybody who knows anything about how artillery works, there's this thing called calling for fire, right? And what that is, if you've ever watched Saving Private Ryan, you guys see those guys on the front line, and they're calling on the radio, and they're calling out grid coordinates, and then all of a sudden they're seeing boom, all these bombs dropping in front of them. Well, it's because they're directing fire support, okay? And so what happens though is oftentimes that round doesn't land where it's supposed to. You then need to do something called adjust fire. Okay, and so it's that process that I realized my whole life has been about adjusting fire. And when I write my book, I might call it Adjust Fire. To be born in a third world country, to come here, to get injured, to then be medically discharged, and I didn't mention that, but that's what prompted me to pursue a career in healthcare. To go from healthcare to wealth care, to go from residential to commercial, it's all been about adapting and overcoming and adjusting fire. And so for those who are transitioning out of the military, what I would say is take action, meaning, yes, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read all the other requisite books that you hear about learning how to do real estate stuff. But at the end of the day, no one ever learned how to swim by reading a book. At some point, you got to jump in the water and start moving your legs and your feet and your arms, right? And so that's what I would say is, yes, use that VA loan to buy that quadplex, okay? Do the house hacking thing. Live in one, rent the other 3. Don't tell them you own the place. Still get a property manager. That's advice number 1. But yes, make use of the resources that you have. And if it doesn't work out, start over, adjust fire, add 50, fire for effect, you know what I mean? And so really, you have a long life ahead of you, no matter if you spent the full 20 in and you're a lifer. It's amazing to me to think about 20 years being considered life, like, oh, I'm a lifer. It's like, wait, that 20 years just goes by so fast. And yet you still have the rest of your life ahead of you. And so I would encourage anybody who's looking to get into real estate, if you're currently in the military, use the resources that you have. Start in residential. Start learning about commercial. But as you do that, think about who else in my circle is like-minded, and we can pull our resources together. And when I say resources, I'm not just talking about capital to go buy, an eightplex maybe with 2 or 3 of your buddies. but also thinking about, okay, who among us can be the one sort of doing the day-to-day work? Okay, that's our boots on the ground. Who's the one who's good at numbers? Okay, well, that's your finance and accounting person. Who's the one who has the rich uncle? Okay, well, that's the one who's going to source capital for you guys. Think about how you can pull those types of resources together in order to do bigger and better things.
Take fire, adjust fire, get your SF team together, your staff, right? I love it. No, it's incredible because, again, you know, in the military, it was one army.
Yeah.
You know, and you learn so much from your experiences. And I'm pretty sure everyone listening in their respective branches, you know, can literally assimilate very quickly. But let's give the audience give them some color about what's the future of Redeem. Obviously, we talked about those initiatives you have, but I know you have some serious, audacious, hairy goals that are out there, especially, you know, you being a man of God. I imagine there's an end state for you and how you see Redeem Investments.
Yeah, so we have transitioned from single asset syndications to doing investment funds exclusively. So whether that's a renewable energy fund or the Redemption Armor Fund, this is the first fund. It's a $20 million raise, which allows us to acquire 8 to 10 properties. We've already closed on 2. We have the next 2 under contract, and then the next 5 lined up in varying stages of negotiations, right? The next fund after that is a $100 million fund potentially. And so I'm actually starting to source capital for that one, even as we're sourcing capital for this one. And so, you know, we have some upcoming closings. And by the way, for those who, you know, after hearing this might be interested in learning more about our fund, you know, contacting us at redeeminvestments.com would be a good way to do that, or investors@redeeminvestments.com. The pathway really for us is to be able to acquire the properties within this first fund, be able to execute the plan even while they're being executed to launch the next fund, okay? And that next fund would enable us to acquire up to about $300 million worth of assets with $100 million of equity. So basically 30% equity and 60 or 70% debt on those assets. And so what I'm also learning in the process is from folks who do this regularly, what they have done is they've gone to their end buyer, so the Blackstones, the KKRs, the BlackRocks, and said, "Hey, what do you want? You're our customer. You're our end buyer ultimately." And when they came to understand that, they would then build a fund specifically for that. So, for example, there are what's called medical REITs out there, right? Real estate investment trusts. Medical REITs have all the capital in the world, as do most of these institutional institutional investors. What they don't have oftentimes is deal flow and local relationships. And we know that real estate's all local, right? If they have someone like us who are operators who are sourcing these one-off medical office buildings, and suddenly we have 10 now that we have in a portfolio, instead of being able to sell all 10 at a multiple of, let's say, 5x, now we're able to sell that bundle at a multiple of 8 or 9x, let's say, right? And so when you talk about sort of the next phase, next evolution, it's really pursuing that type of a journey where we come to find out from our would-be buyers, you know, what is it that you're looking for, so that way we can create this fund and then be able to sell it to you. Because the benefit of doing that, Brian, on behalf of our investors, is these funds are typically have 5-year time horizons, right? If we can execute the plan where we acquire the number of properties necessary in order to then go and sell it to a REIT within a 2 to 3 year time period, all we're doing is we're accelerating the achievement of the value, the realization of the value for our investors. Okay, and when you do that sooner than later, then you increase the velocity of capital. Okay, and so so in other words, instead of taking 5 years to execute the plan, you do it in 2 to 3 years, and you outperform because you're getting a higher multiple or lower cap rate, whichever method you choose, in order to get a higher amount of value for the fund, for your investors. And so that's really the play, I think, over the course of time. Right now, it's obviously a lot of sword fighting, going through the sort of the minutiae of okay, let's get this property under contract, let's get this lender on board, let's raise the equity for this next acquisition and some of those things. But as we get more and more of that type of experience, we seem to be attracting the attention of larger capital allocators who are looking to deploy large tranches of capital. So I'm excited for that day to come.
This is General Napoleon here, baby. He's defeating a detail over here thinking about the war, and dominating one battle at a time. If you guys didn't hear those tactics, right, find that end buyer. I mean, at the end of the day, there's buyers and sellers, and there's always a broker involved. But regardless, he talked about the velocity of capital. Just Google that, right? Talk about that. That's amazing right there. If you guys want to know more about Mr. Catron, he speaks at the Black and Gold Summit. It's at West Point this year, first week of November 1st. And he usually is there dropping some amazing nuggets. And if he's not speaking, he's in the crowd mingling, looking for amazing investors to be part of his mission. But before we go, we need to give a big thanks to Mr. Catron for taking your time out. And what would you like to leave the audience with? Anything?
Man, that's a good question. I don't think I prepared for that one.
It's okay. It's just it's a goodbye.
Man, I think what I would say is just continue to invest in yourself. As I mentioned, despite I'll probably be in this at year 20 and look back and think, man, if I knew then what I know now, right? In other words, just continue to grow and learn. There's so many things I say about that, but yeah, I think continue to invest in yourself, continue to bring people in your life, continue to expose yourself to people like Brian and folks like him who just have a selfless heart to want to serve other people and share knowledge and expertise, and then ultimately start to take action, like I said earlier. There's nothing worse than somebody whose head is full of ideas and unrealized potential, and then they look back and they wonder, or they say, "Oh, I could have done that." It's the very reason, by the way. Now, this is what I'll end with, and I'll give my son sort of a plug here, 18-year-old son, Elijah, who just graduated from high school. So he got accepted to West Point and to McCombs at UT and a range of other schools. And ultimately, what I wanted him to do, even though I didn't nudge him towards applying to the service academies or in any one direction, what I wanted him to do is to be able to apply to the service academies so that he could say to himself, "Oh yeah, I got into those too," right? And so many people that I come across now will say, "Oh yeah, I could have gotten into West Point." It's like, "Oh, that's so interesting. Did you apply?" It's like, "Well, no, but I could." Okay, well, there's a difference in thinking you could have gotten in versus you actually applied and went through the effort and all the hoops to get to the point where you're presented an offer, right? And so that's what my encouragement would be to folks, is to apply the knowledge that you gain and don't just sit on it. Take action.
No, love it. Thanks for your servant leadership. Thanks for living a life of no regrets, really, But thank you so much, guys. Thank you for tuning in. The next episode is going to be amazing, but this is literally memorable. So thank you so much.
All right, brother.
See ya.
Thank you.
Yeah.